Andy Austin here with the next chapter. Actually, it's 2 chapters in one. From The Rainbow Machine, Tales from a Neurolinguist Journal by Andrew T. Austin. Right, these 2 chapters. It's the Endless Loops. That's a page. And Obsessions and Compulsions. Originally, this was the same chapter, but we decided to split them. The Obsessions and Compulsions chapter was really, I think this was the article that changed my life in so many ways, or at least it changed my professional life. Before I'd written the book, before I was really known, I had a website, the 23nlpeople.com website, which had lots and lots of articles on it and various bits and pieces that was largely informing the NLP world. Informing the NLP world. Back in those days, there wasn't much competition for websites, and I was pretty much in the top 5 for most search terms related to Ericksonian hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming. Steve Andreas, who obviously I knew of, I'd read all his books, and Connie Ray's and Tamara's, and I read all their work, and was quite a fan. I got an email from Steve. I was like, oh my god. And he said, what are your thoughts on OCD? Asked a few bits and pieces. What do you think on this? So I wrote quite a lengthy piece. I started to write a little answer, then my answer got bigger and bigger, so it's like I'm replying to the legendary Steve Andreas. And a little need to show off here. So it got bigger and bigger. And essentially that page of email that I wrote then began to be reworked into a chapter, and I thought, oh, interesting this. I could write some other stories, and that's how I started writing the book. So most of what is in that chapter is actually a copy of the email I sent Steve, and was the beginnings of really what I do today and me getting more widely known. He says with like 100 views on each of his videos. So this is about OCD and the TOTE, Test Operate Test Exit loop that was taught in the early days of NLP. I don't know if TOTEs are still taught. It's one of those ones, I think, with the court case between the originators, there was bits of pieces where I think both parties stopped teaching it because it was half one, half the others, or whatever. I don't know the logistics. But I don't know how commonly TOTEs are still taught, which I think is a pity. If you've done NLP training of any form and you're not familiar with TOTEs, it appears in lots of the early books. Do have a look on the internet. There's lots of articles, lots of very good web pages, and there's probably a few videos as well. Because when you start looking at behaviours in terms of TOTEs, it actually can help you understand what it is you're looking at. For me, and that's what these 2 chapters are about, TOTEs explain so perfectly obsessive compulsive disorder. When people are taught in a test, operate, test, operate, test, operate, and they've never got to the point of a test that gives a conclusion to the behaviour so they can exit the behaviour. They're caught in an endless loop. I saw a documentary a few years back on obsessive compulsive disorder, and there was this poor individual. The OCD was so extreme, she got trapped by a cupboard door. She would take something out of the wardrobe and close the door, but it didn't feel closed. So she's never getting the point of kinesthetic satisfaction that says the door is closed. So she'd open it again and then close it again. Open it, close it, open it, close it. Just repeatedly, endlessly opening and closing it. Because the point that says the door is closed, neurologically never arose. So she's still in the operation aspect of closing the door. And it just seemed to be that there was no point of exit. How would she know when the door was closed? Clearly not through the sensory data that she's accumulating through the repeated opening and closing of it. That's when the Tamagotchi, it was around about that time, actually, the Tamagotchi, those little stupid little cyber pets they were called, which was basically just a program designed to fail and shut down the little thing unless you press buttons to... Remember Lost? I thought that was a bit like the Tamagotchi, where they've got to keep pressing the button or the world ends. The same principle. A program designed to fail unless there's a human intervention. And that, for me, the Tamagotchi and the scene in Lost, it demonstrated the test, operate, test, operate, test, operate, test, operate. No test that says you can exit this thing. Now, let's go back to the Lost one. For those who have watched that series, you may not even know what I'm talking about here. They've got to keep pressing the button. At what point do they stop pressing the button? And do they know what's going to happen if they don't press it? It's a problem, and of course it was quite a cliffhanger within that series, a recurring theme throughout one of the seasons. In OCD, what happens if she doesn't shut the door? What would happen? What happens if she leaves it open? And these are some of the considerations to have when working with obsessive compulsive disorder, which, by the way, I disagree now with what I wrote in the chapter. In the chapter, I'm basically suggesting this is a software issue, not a hardware issue. And I now know, because I'm older and wiser and I had a little bit more experience and a few failures in working with people with OCD. I now know it's actually neurobiological. OCD has one of the lowest placebo responses of any condition. Diseases, infectious diseases, syphilis probably has a higher placebo response than OCD will. OCD is incredibly fixed as a state. And now we know more in the research, especially what's come out in the research of Tourette's disorder. The similarity in the neurobiology between Tourette's and OCD is quite remarkable. So it does appear to be neurobiological. Doesn't mean it can't be fixed working on the software. Doesn't mean it has to have surgery or electroshock, whatever medication they give people to change the hardware. It can be worked with, sometimes for some people, some of the time, at a software level, so at a, say, neuro-linguistic programming level, for want of a better term to use there. So I'm not convinced what I wrote in there is actually is necessarily valid now about it being a software issue. It does appear to be hardware. What happens, though, on the psychological, emotional, psychiatric, experiential level? What happens when the person doesn't shut the door? When they check the light switch 1,000 times? What would happen if they didn't check the light switch? And that then takes us into the consequence of not having the second test and being stuck in the loop and then just abandoning the loop altogether. It is the scene of Lost where we don't press the button. It's the Tamagotchi where it cheeps at us and we don't press the button. What happens next? Now, the Tamagotchi, of course, is designed to fail. That was the whole premise of this thing. Can children keep the thing alive? Can we keep it alive? I was working at the hospital at the time, and there were nurses bringing these things into work because their kid was at school. The schools had banned them, and so they were bringing Tamagotchis into the hospital. And they would be, you go to the nurse's desk, and there'd be all these little devices cheeping away. Someone press the button, because people, if you don't press it, it dies. With OCD, if the person doesn't shut the door, if they don't flick the light switch, they probably won't die. But I bet you when we examine the internal pictures, when we examine the internal representations, there's something there that is going to be worth examining and adjusting and potentially changing. Because instead of the second test, there is the what if I don't do this correctly, then something happens. I mean, then we're into a whole what if loop. And then that opens up a whole bunch of stuff around beliefs and identity and stuff like that as well. So OCD is quite a problematic thing for people to have it. And it can be worked with, but it requires a bit of skill and I think quite a length of time. The NLPs do like to make out that OCD is really easy to work with. I'd like to see the evidence of this. Because it's such a dramatic disorder, I do have a suspicion that most people who say they have OCD, it's like PTSD and phobias, they don't. They don't have it at all. I have OCD tendencies. It's my inner OCD. It's become a phrase that people use to describe a mild thing they do. But they've never seen a genuine OCDer. They've never seen the hands of a compulsive hand washer and seen what they have to go through on a daily basis with their disorder and their suffering. They've never seen the person who's a checker. They've never seen those behaviours. That's what OCD is. It's not that mild thing, well, I just like to have things tidy, I'm a bit OCD about tidying up. No, you're not. Believe me. Go and share a house with an OCDer, and then you'll understand. Maybe it's a little bit more. Same thing with phobias. Most phobias, or people say they have a phobia, they don't really have a phobia. The clients that I've seen who you just mention the name of the phobic thing and they go white and start feeling a bit woozy, or you show them a picture of their phobic thing and they lose consciousness. They're always told by therapists, this is the worst phobia I've ever seen. At least that's what they say. I'm not convinced it's even a worse phobia. That's just what a phobia is. A phobia is a completely involuntary, almost psychotic reaction, and sometimes the person will lose consciousness. And this is one of those problems that when diagnostic criteria and names start leaking out into the public domain, and lay therapists who've never actually worked clinically, they've just done weekend training courses in community halls or hotel rooms, that kind of training environment, they've never seen the actual disorder that they are then labeling other people with, and they don't have comparison. So for them, the mild fear, the mildly obsessive person who likes to keep things clean and tidy, they think that is an example of the disorder, and then they go claiming they have worked with OCD, they've worked with these phobias. And possibly they've never done anything of the sort. So anyway, back to the Tamagotchi, back to the totes. This is the thing that I try to portray within these 2 chapters, and I urge people to have an examination of inside themselves. How do you know when to stop doing certain behaviours? And this comes down to locus of control, whether it's an internal locus of control or external. The example I give was of the cocaine guy. He was actually, I met him on a training course. He was one of the fellow attendees. Quite a charismatic individual. And he was there to try and basically get some control of his life. He didn't have any control of his life. Everything was to extremes, constantly to extremes. He didn't know when to stop anything. This is something to consider. How many behaviors are you engaging in on a daily basis? Even if it's in relationships, if it's emotions that you feel, if you have anger issues and that kind of stuff. How do you know when to stop? How do you know when to go, do you know what? I've been angry for a very long time and all these people irritate me. How do I know when to stop being angry? I had this theory once as a child. There was a dwarf. Those who went to school with me watching this video, if anyone is, you'll know the character I'm talking about. The Angry Dwarf, he lived on a school route, and he used to wait at his garden gate, really, at the front of the house, and basically hurl abuse at all the kids walking past. Now, because, especially boys being boys and teenagers being teenagers, and of course him being a dwarf, a lot of abuse got held back, and there was this kind of recursive relationship between a lot of the kids and this Angry Dwarf. Most kids that I knew who walked past his house were a little bit frightened of him because he's a dwarf and he's angry. But some of the older lads especially, they would like give it the large one in giving him back as good as he gave. I had this little theory about this guy. He seemed to be very, very angry, and I thought he's possibly been angry for a very long time, but he's forgotten what he was angry about. So he got made angry, possibly as a child, or something happened, or he got made angry. And he stayed angry. And now he finds lots of things to explain his anger. And in this case, it was all the school kids. All he had to do was not come out, and the whole thing would have stopped. But he's caught up in this behaviour. How does he know when to stop? About 6 months, maybe a year ago. No, it's actually longer than 6 months. So about a year ago now, I went to the supermarket locally here, and as I got out the car, this man came up. He was really angry, and I do not know why he was angry, what he was so irate about. I don't know what it was. I never even bothered to find out. I got out the car, and here he comes. I was like, oh blimey, he's an angry man. And he starts, who do you think? And I said, can I just stop you? How does this end? And that absolutely threw him. Completely threw him. And I said, I'll be back in a bit. I've got to go and do some shopping. And I quickly, I'm getting out of here. Angry man might hit me. And I quickly went into the supermarket. When I came out, I was kind of half expecting him to still be standing there. But he wasn't. She said, how does this end? And I don't think he even considered that. And how many times, I think when I was angry, do we get involved in something without thinking, how does this end? And this ultimately is the thing I'm trying to get to with the test, operate, test, exit. How does your life, the way that you're living, the problems that you have, that crap relationship you have with certain members of your family or neighbours, how does that end and when does that end? And why are you waiting for that culmination? Why not just find a way out, find an exit? Find something that you can go, do you know what, I can stop doing that now. I don't need to keep that going. Some of you, it might be guilt from the past, that you've been carrying guilt, just like the Angry Dwarf, you've been carrying guilt from years and years before. How does that end? Why not bring that to a closure now? Find what has to happen for you to stop maintaining the operation of feeling guilt, or feeling anger, feeling jealousy. What is the test operation you need to do? the test criteria that allows you to exit that strategy of behavior. Do this with all of your own internal problematic stuff. If you're someone who gives yourself a hard time, you call yourself names, you have low self-esteem issues, you have poor confidence issues, you're terrified of public speaking, so you avoid anything in your career that may risk you having to do a public speaking form, in some way, and so you're indirectly sabotaging your own future in your career. How does all that end? Don't just wait and hope for things to get better. Take a proactive and dynamic approach to these things. Find the test, find the exit, find a way out. Don't just wait and then live another day with the same problem, and then another day, go through another day. Directly, dynamically, proactively approach this rather than just passively accept and wait for things to get better. There's too many people doing that. And I'm not sure you need a therapist for this stuff either. You just have to have a proactive mindset where you're actually thinking, okay, I can do something about this. Don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to find something. Just find something. If you have any good examples of this, do please stick them in the comment section. Always good to hear other people's stories. And of course, the more you comment, the more it helps with the YouTube algorithm. That's the real reason why everyone asks you to leave a comment in the comment section, because YouTube sees that you're interactive and therefore the video's got to be popular. And click the like button. Always appreciative for exactly the same reason. I think that's all I'm going to waffle on about. I say use the comment section. It's always appreciated. See you in the next video.